I have this problem where a lot of my spices and things that I use for cooking are also used for juju. And so they're kind of divided between various rooms, including the shrine room, which is where I do most of my sorcery, and sometimes like the area in which I have my tronco and a few of my witchcraft things that do see blood, for example. So they have to be kind of segregated from other shrines. So then I have friends who are like just kind of people that don't really do magic or are not really into anything spiritual and don't really like they know that side of me to an extent, like they're aware it exists, but they mostly know me as an Orthodox Christian who has some very strange cultural practices. And then they're like, yo, where's your cinnamon? Where's your cloves? Like they're like going through all my drawers and stuff in the kitchen because we're cooking together or whatever. And then I'm like, it's in a room I don't let you in 1 second. And I can just sprint upstairs because I have all my like labeled herb jars with like the time it was collected and like the phase of the moon and so on.
Why does the cinnamon have a note on it saying it was purchased in the day and hour of Mercury? What's that?
I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, I've got that big whiteboard in the
Mhm.
hallway leading up to my kitchen, and it'll like be like a list of groceries, like random things in different languages I'm studying, notes from friends that they left when they last visited, and then there's always just like something in usually in Portuguese or in Serbian that will be like, here's this list of offerings that they made for the spirit for this particular occasion, and people are just like, yo, who? Like, why are you always getting flowers? Like, why does it say like raw pork here? And I'm just like, don't worry about it, okay? It's just I'm a
It's
You
little
just
guys
thing
eat
for
a
a
lot of
friend.
organ meat there.
Yeah, yeah,
What's
legit.
up with
It's
that?
yeah, exactly. Because like salt, your spirits too, like take organ meat quite pretty frequently. I think that you and I are blessed to live next to a really good Chinese supermarket that has like everything, from the beef tongue to the giblets to the intestines of various animals, and you can always ask the butchers for things custom, including the blood. Like I feel very at peace knowing that I can always just go in there and be like, here's exactly what I need. Oh, and also the whole chickens, like with the head have come in really handy for your stuff too, Salt.
Yeah, I mean, it's the traditional way of doing things for certain practices is to make sure, it's got the head, it's got everything on. I tell you
Yeah.
what, as well, it's real nice having access to live crabs, not for spiritual reasons, just because I like to look at them.
It's, I always lose Salt in the supermarket because I turn around and I just see him like in the distance, like a anime outro music playing somberly as he like gazes at the live crabs.
Listen, it's just, there's something about them, man. There's something about them. I should probably change my profile picture to a fish.
Yeah, absolutely. Meanwhile, like, he's about to get his crab juju on for some of the Aphrodite stuff that he and I are working on for our big Aphrodite launch. That's going to be coming right up with the anniversary of the podcast, actually. I think that's the date we've set for ourselves while Prig is
Mhm.
left.
Oh yeah, gonna get spooky with the Cypriot lady.
Indeed, indeed. And which is interesting because her main festival, right, Aphrodisia, typically celebrated on the fourth day of the month of Hecatombion. But and accompanied with plenty of interesting rituals, including sacrifice doves and all those other kinds of things. Crabs, of course, especially being really sacred too. But since we've been to the Pedro Toromio, the rock of the Roman, as it were, the Aphrodite's birthplace, and Paphos in Cyprus, it's we have a lot of great materia, and I'm really, really freaking excited about this. We've also made lots of offerings there as well as on home, including doves. So I'm looking forward to incorporating all the material. It's been cooking for months, and we're
Mhm.
getting we're reaching the finish line soon. So I'm really, really excited to share our love of Cyprus, the Lady of Cyprus, with everyone who's been following along with our journey.
This is one that we're already really proud of. So
Yeah.
hopefully it will be well received because
Oh
it's
yeah.
it's been a literal blood, sweat, and tears endeavor.
I know. I believe me, I'm so excited to actually like do a whole episode and a post about what experiences we had and the vision and the very physical manifestation of the goddess and everything we went through. But another time, getting ahead of
Mhm.
ourselves, let's talk about what, is the thread that ties all of this together, all these experiences and it's been a constant reminder throughout all of our episodes that are more practical oriented, such as these, which is the actual reciprocal relationships we form with spirits and how do we exactly feed them?
be not alarmed at the frightful howls which you may hear. Sfinga, Salt, and buy yourself something nice, Key.
Buy yourself something nice. Why are we buying ourselves something nice, Dad?
Oh man, because sometimes when you're making offerings to spirits, it's not so much going directly to them. They're using it to buy themselves something nice.
And their
Or
friends
maybe
something nice.
yeah, legit. Maybe they're buying off another spirit or doing God knows what with it. And sometimes it's not our business. But we'll get into all that later.
Legit, when I go to the Hong Kong style bakery next door, like at this point, Salt's very familiar. If here I go alone, like we always bring back something for spirits and something for each other. Which, by the way, thank you very much for that matcha bun that I devoured shortly before hitting record.
And to keep the matcha bun funds up, remember to I love smooth transitions. Oh man. Remember to check us out at twitter.com/frightful howls and patreon.com/the frightful howls. We have a bonus episode there every month, curated by and just for our patrons. We have Salt's fantastic almanac, which has already proven itself to be an accurate and invaluable resource to our listeners, especially this month. Knocked the Park King, a fantastic addition for anyone to have. We also host a monthly live occult book club where we discuss a text of your choosing. We have show notes for every episode and a ton of other stuff. Keep your eye out for additional things coming soon to the Patreon as well.
Yeah, legit. Many, many interesting requests from our existing patrons. So we're going to be upgrading some of the things going on. Also, this month's book club is Lux Hey Racist by Daniel Schulk. Last time it was the ever wonderful Cunning Folk and Familiar Spirits by Emma Wilby. So we're always thrilled to have people join. And even if they can't join live, like they get a recording afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Of course, always remember to give us a like, give us a rating, give us a review on whatever platform, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you might be listening to us. It really helps us out and allows us to wage an eternal war on the demiurge of the algorithm.
So it's like, but I like the demiurge. Like, well, not the algorithm demiurge, babe.
Well, what if the demiurge decided that the demiurge, the algorithm, could take over? Hypothetically.
I have a movie suggestion for you, Salt. Let's get you a leather trench coat and some sunglasses first, though.
That's not really my style. Kind of like the big octopus looking robots. They seem like good guys.
And if you need to wage the war on the big octopus looking robots that may be haunting your dreams, I offer sorcery.
You do. Oh my goodness. And has it been kicking off? Thank you everyone so much for not just on our Patreon and on our website, but for all the great comments you guys have been leaving on Instagram. I'm really thrilled to see you just a few weeks in and you're already like doing so well for your clients and people are getting great results and between your readings and your coaching and your spell work. Congrats, man.
Oh, thank you very much. I am really happy with how everything's gone so far. Really love the reception, the feedback, the influx of people bringing interesting issues to me, and getting our brains chugging along together and getting my spirits to work.
I like how you sound like the Godfather. It's just like, yes, bring me an interesting task.
No, at the end of the day, I just like to help people out.
No, for sure.
I'm glad that things have been looking up in the lives of everyone who was coming along. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And you do a stunning job at it. I always am emphasizing your prowess because I've seen it myself.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, man's hitting it hard, man.
That's right.
And speaking of emphasizing prowess, Sfinga, your readings,
Yay.
The best in the business.
No.
Yes. And nothing but the highest glowing review possible for your Father Nancy services. It is the most accurate thing that money can buy.
Oh, please. Thank you. And of course, Saul offers everything and anything astrological, horror, electional, natal readings, all of these and more available at withcunningcommand.com.
Mm.
So if you want to know what time to come into work where your boss isn't going to be an asshole, just the right amount of being late or being a little bit early, then give me a shout.
Yeah, the people who want like an election for a talisman versus people who want to know just how much they can push it with their boss. And of course, you guys can hit us up on social media. I'm Dragon Cunning on Instagram. Salt is Salt CNC. That's the Cunning command. And of course, the once elusive, now slightly less elusive B key is the B this time is barnowl.key on Instagram. So hit us up.
Send me memes.
More.
Yeah, right. Send me offerings of memes.
Yeah, exactly. That is how you to ingratiate yourself in our lives. If you've ever been on the receiving end of me sending you memes, you know that once the door is open, it does not stop.
Oh man. And at that, our first question of the day: when to give offerings? When do you give them? Now, why give them to begin with? And one of the easiest things to say is just give them when you promise them.
Yeah, especially when the part of the like magic that you're doing with a spirit involves some kind of reciprocation in terms of like not just feeding them, but feeding the working. We mentioned before, spirits sometimes will require a larger offering, not because they're trying to kind of bribe or like get more out of you. It's because they're paying off other spirits in the chain of command, right? We mentioned this quite a few times, I think in our Pacts Praxis episode 15, where we discussed like the ins and outs of making pacts with spirits, but I think it's good to elaborate on it in much more detail here. Sometimes it's not the spirit that volunteers to do the work for you is not the one that necessarily has the greatest skills. It's the one with the greatest access to the kinds of beings and the kinds of hierarchies that will best enable this to actually work in real life. And so they have to, an extravagant offering or a feast of some kind might be distributed to other spirits that they are paying off, that have connections to the spirits they don't, that can then solicit help from that particular king or queen of that particular realm to dispatch a familiar from that place to do this and so on. It's contract based, right? We're all very familiar with the Saint Expedite pound cake offering, which is not all there is to it, right? People often give like red flowers, they give in public thanks, which is something that we're going to be touching on soon. But these kinds of expectations, these pacts that are essentially already pre-existing protocols of what a spirit expects in return for a working, especially a successful working as a payment, thanking them for completing the task when they've carried it out. These are things that you can find in pretty much every cultural protocol, right? In terms of like what is the appropriate offering, what to give versus what not to give, what are the taboos. Well, you never want to give something that would actually offend the spirits. Something that I've learned, not necessarily the hard way personally, but more because I get really overeager. I like to do big spirit feasts. I like to give lots of like food. I like to cook for spirits. I actually put a lot of effort into how I treat mine because they do really well for me, and they've always kept me, they've always done right by me, and they've always been exceptionally loyal and helpful and ready to act, even without me necessarily feeding them. It's one of those things where I would say that we have a relationship now that is not based on just transactions, but has been based on an actual reciprocal emotional bond. And so my spirits go out of the way for me before I even ask. Like they'll take care of things before I need them taken care of. So I like to go out of my way to actually, spoil them in return, especially because they're so good to me. But as a result, living with Salt, I'm like, hey, like, let's do this cool thing for your spirits. Like I heard like these things are offerings, right? And then he has to like make sure I realize that like it's the numbers count, how many of each fruit do you give? What are the seasonings that you use, whether something is raw or not? Like Salt will sit me down, give me like so many different interesting like protocols around certain kinds of like Chinese aesthetics in terms of not just the feng shui, but like just genuinely like how these are presented, when is it appropriate, when is it appropriate to even give it in the home versus outside, and so on. Things that I'm familiar with in my own traditions, but obviously since I'm not practicing his own, less so for him. And so like I get over eager and I'm like, what if we do this huge thing? And then he tells me, well, actually, it's more of a temple offering for a home or a private shrine. We would do this instead. So like always, sometimes like less is more, but what's always more and what's always best is knowing the protocol of the spirit that you're actually trying to think.
Yeah, I think it's crucial to just kind of, because there's different taboos. You don't want to be, I think one of the classic examples is you don't say thank you to the fairies, right?
Mhm.
And in a similar sense, like offerings can be interpreted in various ways. I think, you know, a lot of spirits, especially the more benevolent kind, the ones who we are generally going to be giving offerings to, especially non-transactional kinds. I think generally speaking that they're going to be a lot more forgiving, especially when, it's a nice gesture, it's a gift. But at the same time, there's also, because of that, there's a risk of offense as well, in the sense of, you don't want to give someone with very refined tastes moldy fruit, right? Like that kind of thing. It's just,
You don't want to give
and
anyone moldy fruit.
well, I mean, with spirits, you never know, right?
That's actually
That's
true.
the
Yeah,
thing.
sometimes you get the ones that like deal with rot and decay and they're like, no, give me your compost. Like that's what I patron.
Yeah, exactly. Like and I think that's what makes offerings such an interesting topic as well, right? Is like the diversity involved, the way even within the same kind of like hierarchies and associations where it's can have very different needs, very different appetites, very different preferences and rules and strictures, that kind of thing. Like maybe this guy doesn't eat meat. Maybe he's going to get pissed off if there's meat on the plate or meat on the table, or
Mm.
if you've eaten meat when you give it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then you've
yeah.
got, yeah, or like booze. Booze, for example, is another good one.
Yeah,
Like,
totally. Like you don't want to go to a friend whose house whose family are, let's say, very like anti-alcohol for religious reasons, for otherwise, and you show up with a bottle of wine because in your culture that's the polite thing to do, right? So it's the same thing, like making sure like the kind of offering that you present, the question right now is like when to give, right? But it's also part of the timing is like your own bodily purification. So like maybe you wouldn't give the offering if you haven't showered recently. Some of my spirits like don't care. I come home from work, I picked up something from the bakery along the way, I put it on my house spirit's shrine, and right as I'm like, getting my work clothes off and changing and kind of starting to do some chores around the house or starting to cook, like I always make sure the house spirit gets something along the way. And then once everything's done, whatever I've cooked, I give to my ancestors. I give them a little portion. Doesn't have to be anything extravagant, but a little bit of everything that I basically made always goes to the ancestors. And when I refresh, I give them alcohol and water, sometimes coffee. And then you have situations with certain shrines where like I have to have showered. Certain spirits I don't approach very often, but when I do, I should have abstain from meat, which I do anyway. I'm a vegetarian actually for spiritual reasons, in terms of like I don't my pact is with a particular spirit that I have is that I don't eat anything I don't kill. And because I participate in more than well, yeah, more than one animal sacrifice tradition, shall we say. I'm not very public about some of them. It's one of those things where, in those cases, if I've slaughtered the animal, I can eat it. If that is something that is an offering that's shared between the spirit and I, like a part of me is nourished by that. Like, obviously, I can use that. But otherwise, this is something that I need to, refrain from. And that includes, having touched blood recently. Some spirits don't want me approaching them in general, including if I'm menstruating. It's something about the dirtiness of that or any kind of misogynistic taboo. It's genuinely just because it is blood. So as a result, I want to make sure that I'm particularly like clean to that spirit standards. And cleanliness here, probably a good topic entirely on its own for a future kind of boot camp episode, as it were, but like not having to do with like divorcing the idea from personal morality or personal worth is really important, right? It's not that you're dirty and unclean and don't deserve to be near the spirit. It's purely just like some spirits have different like cultivating an atmosphere for them where they are comfortable to be present, and especially when their sense of smell is extremely sharp, especially when there's certain things that it's kind of like when Key and I were in the Balkans, there were times when we had to approach some churches and mosques, with more of a modest clothing, and sometimes we were on the beach and it was fine, and I was in a sundress and he was in a muscle tank, it was no problem.
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, propriety and custom, right, is key.
Hmm. It's to be
With
key.
people, with spirits, anything.
Oh man. And then one of the other things as well is like, um, how does the spirit actually interpret the offering, like the cause behind, a very extravagant, massive feast that's just, this beautiful pile of everything. Is it being given in celebration of that spirit, or is it being given because you fucked something up and need to smooth everything over?
Yes, yeah,
Like
yeah.
one of the examples that we've used on this podcast and on the website before, it's like, if you have a pact with the spirit where you give them like a penny once a month, and you observe that diligently, that is infinitely better than doing these like extravagant, massive feasts monthly because you fucked it up, you know?
Hmm.
It's like, so a little can go a long way when, you know, it's that token of the oath kept.
Yeah, because it's the offering isn't even the penny, it's the time, it's the
Mhm.
commitment, it's the fact that you agreed to do it monthly. And so that's may seem like an extreme case, but it's something that's important because people sometimes think like, oh, I'll make up for it by giving something extravagant. But like, what if the spirit is the kind that cares more about your oath and your word than anything else? And I think that it's important to realize that a spirit's definition of a promise may not be yours. Some of mine, just by me saying I will do this, that to them that is a promise that they're going to hold me to. So I have to kind of keep my tongue in my mouth, as it were, around their shrines because I don't want them to expect something when I'm just kind of musing out loud. Because like you guys know, I talk to myself out loud all the time. So it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, like I make plans and like I'm like mulling over things and I'm like, right, I should actually be very careful about this because I want them to know that like if I say something around you, like this is gonna happen, it is gonna happen. Whereas other spirits may just interpret that as me making a plan. That could be
Yeah.
modified later. So always know the taboos, because especially depending on not just like cleanliness taboos, but cleanliness of mind and of speech.
Mhm. It just reminded me. Do you remember when we were planning on making a powder and in front of the expedite shrine, they're like,
Mhm.
okay, do you want to make this today or tomorrow?
Oh my God, yeah, we literally like we joked about it afterwards that we had cursed ourselves. We obviously hadn't cursed ourselves, but it was like uh I think it was me that actually said it. I was like, "Oh, do you want to do this today or tomorrow?" And we just felt like the lens flare of Saint Expedite. Like I should make a meme about that where it's just like the bright red eyes like beaming into us. It's like you said today. So we literally had to start doing it that day. Like we had it was like in the evening too, where we were like, "Oh, like like Key was visiting me." And we were like, "Oh, let's like do a bunch of stuff while you're here. Oh, this is the first day that you visited." Like his plane landed that afternoon. It was the evening. And they're like, "Oh, we should make an expedite powder. What do you think? Like tonight, tomorrow?" And it was like, oh, so we like ran to the grocery store. Yeah, already started making the pound cake. We were like, okay, because it was gonna be crumbled and added to the powder. But yeah. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes to the actual Saint Expedite powder blog post that we had that was about this adventure.
It's so funny.
Some man's a fiend for powder. Some saints are fiends for speed.
Yeah, our cocaine-free expedite powder was nonetheless a hit.
um, Speaking of that pound cake that we had to run out and, you know, get a bunch of stuff and start making it and actually incorporating it into the powder itself. You know, the offering might be a payment for the working to generate that enchantment, you know, to pay off any random spirits that might come into contact with the powder to be like, ooh, tasty, you know,
Mhm.
thing that Saint has eaten. Or it could be considered, you know, I'll give you half the pound cake and crumble the other half into the powder.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
mhm.
I think another thing to think about with timing, right? So we is the before our working versus after our working. So like
Mhm.
we mentioned this in one of our Q&As, one of our bonus episodes for our patrons, which was paying half in advance versus half upon completion. Like I'll give you this offering when the petition occurs or the stage of the petition occurs. So like what is it like having something in the beginning that boosts the power and incentivizes the spirit versus having withholding some aspect of it for when it's complete, right? And that's something that
Mhm.
comes up to divination. Like you might like I often divine on figuring out the offering, and then like usually if it's with a spirit that I'm very close and familiar with, like I'll pretty much know immediately. So like I'll just get an intuitive impression or kind of communication from them as to what they need. But otherwise, it's a matter of actually doing it, right? And making sure
Mhm.
that you have figured out. I mentioned before that speaking of Favamancy, the bean divinations that I provide for clients, sometimes the actual beans themselves will be collected and put in a pouch on the spirit's shrine. And it's like, hey, you said in this divination that you would do it and that it would work. So I'm holding you to that. So here's this. And some of the offerings will touch this cloth and or be laid out on top of it, the same cloth that divined. and then make sure that you actually do it, right? So it's kind of like
Mhm.
holding a spirit accountable and being like, I understand things can go wrong. I understand unexpected resistance can come up. We had a whole episode last time on troubleshooting your sorcery. That was episode 23. That was all about why things may not, work out. And that's totally fine. But let's make sure it does in the end work, right? So timing for before and after is always great, and because remember that initial offering may be used to hire and pay off other spirits, which is why it has to be given before. And sometimes the
Mhm.
offering can be part of the working, right? Like it is the food, it is the materia that you're giving that is going to be also where certain sorceress implements are occurring, right? So you could have like here's this whole layout of fruits and things that are given to you, and here's scissors on top that are going to divorce this couple, for example, if you're doing the separation working, or here's a petition that's ground into powder or burnt down with various poisonous and kind of baneful things that is going to be mixed up into this flour that is being given, right, to be distributed and stuff like that. So it's one of those things that like always know that you can be very creative with offerings. They can absolutely be part of the working.
Definitely. The pound cake of art, not to, belabor the example, but the one that we had dropped off outside of a building that needed to be jujued with the petition sandwiched inside of it and a bunch of stuff like impaled through the top.
Yeah, it
So,
was actually Sin Expedite working. We had our own powder there. We bought a pound cake like from a supermarket. Then you and I and a mutual friend went to the building in which the paperwork we were trying to influence was being processed, and we left the pound cake in front of the steps with incense sticks stabbed in it, coins from different currencies that were relevant to the situation, since this was an international situation, being stabbed into it in certain numbers, like cloves stabbed into it. Like it was a whole layout, and we sprayed it with alcohol and everything like that and left it there just to, I'm sure the security cameras got a good whiff of a
mhm.
bunch of people in androgynous black clothing and masks, just like looking like absolute gorillas, and yet still managing to. And it's like, what are they even doing? Why are they leaving a cake? But obviously, this is one of those things where the archaeologist comes along and it's like, there's a ritualistic purpose. But yeah, I mean, it worked really freaking well because this was a notoriously slow bureaucracy that we got. We were expecting 3 months of wait, and it ended up being 3 days.
Shout out to Expedite.
Sure. Yeah, Salvi. And of course, we have the bribes, right?
Mhm.
Offering when to give because you're bribing spirits, right? And I would divide that between bribing your friends versus bribing your enemies, right? So bribing your friends, this came up in I think the most recent Q&A for our patrons, which was like wafting the offerings to your spirits and being like, look at how wonderful this is. Like, don't you love this pound cake? Don't you want it? And then you just eat it in front of the Senex shrine, Or you're like, no, you don't get it. My friends are eating this. Like you didn't do it yet. Like you're gonna have this when it's done,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, I need it like 3 business days. Let's go. So not just bribing in terms of like, here's a bunch of things, go do it for me, but like withholding, like the timing is withheld because you're like tempting the spirit to be like, you could have this, but not yet. Versus bribing enemies, right? Like bribing spirits that are interfering, that come up in divinations about like why the ritual will not work, and bribing them ahead of time, like move out of the way, like relinquish your protection from this person that I'm dominating because they're my boss, or do these things, move out of the side. Now, obviously, if they're loyal, they're not necessarily going to fall for that, but a lot of things are incidental, and a lot of things can be justified, right? In terms of like,
Mhm.
let this pass through, it'll be a better for everyone. And certainly you can bribe land spirits and different guardians to look the other way when you're doing something that they might otherwise not necessarily be thrilled with, because you're like, hey, I'm giving you this now, I'm going to give you this later, I will clean up, I'm going to need to. This happened actually when I was doing the Oracle of Kronos, the PGM ritual in which you have to grind salt, like a salt mill, over grass, which obviously can ruin the fertility of the ground, right?
Mhm.
And that's part of the way that you essentially provoke the deity Kronos to manifest. You're also burning an incense that is meant to be, both coercive and compelling as well as Saturnian in its nature. And you have a phylactery to protect you. I have a whole post. We actually talked about this in episode 2 as well, which is exorcism and antiquity. So you have a whole experience there that I've already written up on what that was like. It was quite spooky. But one of the things that occurred, right, was like beforehand, because I felt this is like land that I've worked a lot for magic, so I felt like really weird about doing the whole salt mill thing. So I
Mhm.
basically paid off the spirits beforehand, and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna come back and like clean up and in the morning, and I'm going to like do what I can to like add more fertilizer and stuff like that, you know, because depending on how long it takes to get the deity to show up with the manifestation that I experienced, which as you guys know, and as I wrote about on the blog post, was very intense, like was absolutely quite spooky. You know, I want to make sure that it's done right. So it also can't be just like look the other way for now. Don't think that I'm like not respecting you anymore. I just need to use a space for magic. And like a divination can be done to confirm if they're cool with that, but sometimes you just get the immediate impression they're like, yeah, fine, okay, but be quick.
I think as well, when it comes to like the more difficult spirits, as you were saying earlier, one of the things as well is like depending on the nature of the spirit, it might be a matter of it can't help itself, right? Like if you chuck a bone in front of a dog, or let's say a chunk of meat in front of a hungry ghost, well, he's going to go chasing after it. He's not really paying attention to what's around him because he just sees the meat.
Yeah.
That's or you know, let's say you want to give offerings and it's in a precarious place, right? Like the spirits in that place aren't necessarily amenable. You don't know who's there really. What are you going to do? Well, you're probably going to throw something over the side, just to distract them, keep them away from where the actual offering's going on. Like, you know, here's a little piece, leave the rest of it be. Go chase that down, go munch on that. Just keep out of this particular place. And, you know, you're not necessarily saying that to them. You're just kind of, you know, that they're just going to go running after the first thing they see. That's, and, you know, I think you also have the same kind of situation with more malicious spirits as well. Like when people are possessed, when there's kind of issues going on in that area, or when they're being harassed by spirits, you can kind of potentially correct the wrongdoings with a bribe. Like, hey, this guy pissed off these spirits. That's another situation where this kind of bribery, so to speak, can come into play as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Leveraging, you know, if you're good with your spirits, we mentioned this in the Pacts episode, right? Like when you're good and you can vouch for your own like authority and your own integrity, and your spirits can do the same, you can leverage that over others and be like, hey, I keep my promises. I fed my spirits. What has this person done? And then tell the spirit, like, move aside while I do this.
Yeah, exactly.
So now that we've considered some timings, maybe we should talk about the kinds of offerings. We mentioned food, right? But there's also that universal setup of a white candle in a glass of water, or in my case, a beeswax candle.
Orthodox gang.
I'm close to converting key, guys. Very, very close. Which is an offering unto my spirits.
Oh man. But yeah, it's something to be said about the you know, what constitutes a more immaterial offering. You know, of
Hmm.
course, religious observances that spirit may have kept in life can be observed again, you know, if part of an offering to a, you know, let's say you had an ancestor who was particularly devout, going to church with that spirit, being like, okay, let's go. Of course, there is also, you know, integrating yourself into the life of the spirit in other ways, you know, listening to or, you know, playing over the radio music or like a show that spirit might have liked, you know, doing activities that they may have liked in life. You know, if you're, let's say, playing cards with some friends, you can put out another chair at the table and be like, hey, join in, let's have some fun.
Yeah, thanks for doing that last time. I did totally notice it. Because okay, we had just done a pretty big offering ceremony to my Pombagira, and we had a few friends over, and Key had just spent a long time in the kitchen while I was setting up, just preparing a beautiful feast of arepas and pork and jackfruit for the vegetarians and red salsa and green salsa. It was amazing. You are a phenomenal cook, as everyone who's ever met you knows. And so as we were finishing dinner afterwards, you took out a deck of playing cards from my stack of like reserve decks of regular playing cards for Juju, and you started doing card tricks for people from the Malleus Maleficarum. And no one knew, including myself. We didn't realize they were from the Malleus. Like, I was such a cultural flex on a bunch of other sorcerers. And then you were like, let's play blackjack. And as we're playing blackjack and switching who's the dealer every turn, right? I'm just like, there's another chair. And then I looked at it a little bit. I'm like, oh, it's you. Yeah. I mean, like, okay, key spirits love gambling. That's no secret on the podcast, right? There's actually a whole thing in our house, you know, where Salt and I live, where people will always set one extra plate no matter how many people are in there. If there's like 3, they'll set up 4. If there's 4, they'll set up 5. People will always automatically set up one more plate that we need. Because spirits are just so used to getting fed that they'll sit with a table sometimes with us, which is very common actually in the Balkans, is to have an extra seat at the table for like an ancestor, a saint, so depending on your pact. You know, it could be a dragon, could be a vila, a fairy, and so on. But again, that's best not touched unless you have those pacts.
Mhm. There's a running gag that chair is named for just whatever random saint off the top of our head.
Yeah, it's Demetrius of Thessaloniki this time.
Oh man, it's like you also have to get the other chair for the horse. It becomes a whole complicated thing, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But that's in material offerings. I do like the idea of playing music or listening to music that they like, doing activities with the spirit that they actually enjoy, developing a skill, like learning something on behalf of that spirit. One of my closest spirits and one of my main traditions, one of his main things for me is that he just wants me to always be learning new things. And that makes him happy, right? Like Saint Cyprian just wants me to learn more magic a lot of the time, more than he wants anything else, right? So it's dedicating myself to learning different kinds of systems, apprenticing widely, but also going to church, right? He's still a Christian saint. Same thing with other spirits that always are motivating me to specifically like learn languages. That's a thing that we've hammered on the podcast so often. You know, like I'm currently working on language number 6, and it is just a joy to be able to access primary source data and talk to people who are preserving the lineages that I'm interested in or I'm actively apprenticing in. You know, the people who like have literally it was their ancestors that have passed us on. The least you can do is to be able to make the communication easier for them. It shows your dedication, it shows your sincerity. So languages are a huge thing. I learn them for spirits all the time. I find that it goes faster, like I'll memorize the grammar and the vocabulary more easily if I've agreed to a spirit, like, hey, I'm going to learn this, help me make this more organic for me. Make it easier for me to find a tutor, make it easier for me to have the money for the courses, make it easier for me to memorize things, right? And of course, other kinds of skills. I mean, I think we've mentioned a few times in the podcast that one of the things your spirit's key wanted you to learn was lock picking.
Yeah, legit. The it's intimately linked, shall we say, to that spirit's particular arcana and ways that he is able to like work around magical problems and like access places. But he's like, to better understand how I work and how I do things, and just as a little bit of a kind gesture to me, and an offering, if you will. Had to learn how to pick a bunch of different styles of locks, and very useful for materia gathering if you find yourself stuck in a location being chased by guards and have run out of bats to conjure.
Oh my God. One of the best. I think about that one all the time when I think you told that story in episode 6, Scrying the Spirits in the
Mhm.
beginning. Yeah, it was so good. Go gadget bat familiar because the guard of the cemetery was trying to chase you around and your car was parked away. So you had to juke him. Good God.
I'm just glad I didn't get magicians at work.
That's true. That's so true. Otherwise,
Talking,
you'd have to be putting down the law.
yeah. Talking of work as well, I think one of the things you can talk about learning as well is crafts, right? Like a particular profession. I mean, there's a whole reason we have deities and patron saints of a certain professions, like, and learning that particular profession, learning that particular craft is a kind of participation in it. It's a kind of honoring them. It's a kind of way of getting to know or familiarize oneself with these spirits, right? Like if we're talking about a spirit of scribes, like a spirit who rules over, reading, writing, that kind of thing, then naturally, I think if that kind of spirit is important to oneself, then it's kind of the natural conclusion to start participating in that spirit through these things. Like, maybe that means being drawn to more, I guess, literary forms of practice. Maybe that means not so much as far as pragmatic, the spiritual practice, but in one's mundane life, because that can also be a suitable place for these offerings as well, right? It's not just necessarily spiritual versus mundane, because even the mundane is obviously going to have a spiritual dimension towards it.
Hmm. Absolutely, yeah. So another thing that I do, especially for saints, is donating to charitable causes in their name. So I'll say like this is on behalf of or as part of in veneration of Saint Expedite or in veneration of Saint Cyprian of Antioch and Saint Justina of Antioch, or various other saints that I work with. Most recently I did one for Haralambie or Saint Haralambos. And so another thing that you can also do is also, causes associated with the spirits that don't even have to be religious, like environments, local things that are important to your city and environment and so on and so forth. Like really huge things that you can actually make a difference in volunteering your time, right?
Mm-hmm. One of the preferred necromantic offerings that I like to engage with is to go on Find a Grave. And if you're working a cemetery, fill out the request for people. Be like,
Mhm.
I know where this person is because I'm here all the time, So here is a way that they might be remembered.
Such an easy thing for magicians to do that are often engaging in like necromantic practices is like, well, we're here already.
Yeah,
We
literally.
we know this grave, like this whole area very intimately. Like, why not just go for it?
hmm And one of the other ones that I just want to mention because it's a good cause is donating to coffin funds so
Yeah.
that the dead may actually be buried.
Absolutely, yeah.
And hey, nothing wrong with getting a dead guy in your debt.
So true.
Exactly.
Get your graveyard wanderers on.
Right.
Such a good book by Tom Johnson.
hmm Bless your shotguns and have ravens incubate stones as eggs for you. It's a great time. Yeah, speaking of having the dead people in your debt, how do your offerings relate to the spirits you're giving them to, and how do they influence those spirits by the nature of the material or the act itself?
Absolutely. And that goes beyond, like, for example, cooling a spirit using cold offerings, like making sure they're calm. Like if they're insulted or angry or heated on your behalf and you want them to be chiller, or you need the house to be chiller because you're doing peaceful homework for either a client or for yourself. You want them to relax, right? Even if they're upset on your behalf. So ice cold water, that kind
Mhm.
of thing. Making sure there's like perfumes wafting in the air that are sweet smelling or cooling and calming and stuff like that, making sure that they're kind of like have eaten heavier starchy foods that sometimes can induce
Mhm.
essentially a food coma in a spirit. Like they just get fat and are like, oh, and so that's why we often feed the dead heavy starchy foods across cultural traditions, right? It's always porridges, it's always like boiled yams or potatoes that are mashed up, very plain, very unseasoned. Like typical ancestor offerings will include like grains and so on, and like milk that will be pretty like not necessarily the tastiest thing ever, but will absolutely fill something up, right? And
Mhm.
it's also poverty food, right? Keep in mind, like, I mean, half the things that I offer are very much of that nature, but also when you're doing a big feast, a celebration for, in my case, a slava, for a saint, a spirit festival, key, you and I obviously observe a bunch of them that
Mhm.
have to do with particular saints, but Salt and I observe as a home, as a household, Lunar New Year, and a number of other things, including Mid-Autumn Harvest Festivals. So we give plenty of offerings then. Birthdays, right, for initiations, anniversaries of initiations, and like when a spirit's settlement was first made. So when a spirit was essentially born in its physical form. And these kinds of things, as well as anniversaries for spirit marriages, obviously very relevant to me. Obligations, like times of the year that you owe a spirit something. Zadoshnice, being a huge one, the 4 yearly necromantic obligations to the dead, in Balkan folk orthodoxy and so on. So it's one of those things that like I think it's important to note that yes, timings influence these kinds of offerings, but in terms of their purpose, but so does the kind of offering that you give, right? Are you celebrating
Mhm.
them so you're getting them plenty of diverse things? Are you cooling them down and kind of getting them into a bit of a calm state by overfeeding them in some starchy stuff? Are you giving alcohol to take the edge off of certain spirits that are very smart, as it were, and
Mhm.
cunning, and so you need them to kind of like chill for a second so you get them a bit drunk? Or are you giving them certain kinds of alcohol to heat them up, Fireball or whatever, or like the classic case in Brazil of like cachaça filled with peppers, right? That just heats
Mhm.
the spirit immediately and gets them ready to go to war.
spicy food in general, for that matter, like extremely highly aromatic, fragrant, spiced foods that like almost, make it impossible to be in the house when you're cooking them.
Listen, I give
Are
lao ganma, like
mhm.
chili sauce, Chinese chili oil, like to spirits when I need them to get ready to go. Like I'm just like,
Mhm.
guys, this gets me ready to go. You know, with the spirits having more advanced senses of smell than we do, it's gonna be even better.
Even in terms of things like meat and vegetables, right? Like, and the species of these things, like, certain species, they might have taboos around, it might upset them, it might distress them, or it might, you know, maybe the spirit you're offering to, maybe he really fucking hates whales. So if you offer him whale blubber, he's gonna love it. The,
Where are you getting this? What black market do I have to go visit with you?
He's got the secret ambergris plug for perfuming.
Literally.
listen, listen, sometimes you got sailors in your ancestors and they're just used to sailing after whales.
I do love that you and Key both are like sailor people.
Mhm. The
When
maritime ghosts haunting me always.
no, literally, like we were on the coast in several different countries recently, and Keeves like was just trancing out constantly. Like we were on a boat, and he was like, "Whoa," you know. I was like, "Well, careful." And then he just casually over-explained to me in the best way possible, like all this cool like Hagstone fishing lore that you know. That later on turns out like the place we were in had very identical lore because I was reading one of their like museum textbooks that I ended up
Mhm.
buying.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see how kind of cross-cultural the seafaring charms can be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They always are. I mean, like I'm always fascinated by mountain shepherd cultures, like my own,
Mhm.
being very similar to other mountain shepherd cultures. Though that said, though, shout outs to Croatian Selkies. Not that they're called Selkies, obviously, but I love
Mhm.
that there's a whole lore of the seal mermaids. Speaking of meat, right? Meat versus vegetables and the species of animal that is being given also flavors workings intensely, right? Birds tend to be much more cooling than four-legged animals in many African traditional religions. Not just there, though, also in the Balkans, like my own familiarity with the animal sacrifice practices there in Kurban and so on. Like you get to see very similar ideas of like how is, let's say, a bull much more of an intense, like hot offering than let's say a goat, which is itself more intense than let's say a rooster.
But there's
Mhm.
also like prey animal versus predatory animals as well, right? Like
Yeah,
if you want to encourage a spirit to a more aggressive kind of line of work, then maybe you want to give him some kind of predatory animal or,
my
an
hunter,
apex
yeah.
predator even.
And there's a difference, I think, in giving the meat that you've just bought at a supermarket, for example, which is always appropriate if the spirit is one, like happy to receive that, and two, it's not like an insult to them, right? They're not someone who gets mad at meat, but two, like is known in their cultural protocols that it will heat them up to do the work, versus sacrificing an animal, in which case the spirit of the animal itself, since it is being killed as part of the process, becomes a kind of familiar or messenger to that spirit, that can then go and dispatch it, right? Versus there's cases of like no animal death is inherently involved by your hand, like you just purchased the bones, but it is something that that spirit in particular will be like, I don't care how you come by it. You don't have to necessarily do anything about it personally, but make sure that you bring me the bones of these kinds of birds and dogs because I'm gonna want them for my vessel so I can send those kinds of spirits out.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what's fun about these offerings, right? It's just there's so much diversity in terms of what they want and how things figure. And I mean, even in these cases that we're talking about, how they can influence spirits, but different spirits have different, different relations to these things. Like one herb might be more jarring to one spirit. Like, let's say we have poisons, for example. Some spirits are going to love it. That's going to be their bread and butter. And then you've got others where that's going to be a massive taboo. It's going to disgust them. It's going to really, really disturb them. It's going to basically make them, you know, if it doesn't offend them, it's going to limit what you can do with them. There's this kind of dynamic element to this whole process, which I think really drills in the fact that you just need to know what they want specifically. Like you need to know your spirits when you're giving them these offerings. So talk
Mhm.
to them.
Yeah. Talk to them, know what they like, And also always a good thing to negotiate in the beginning of a spirit relationship is just like give me a quick rundown on what you really don't want.
Mhm.
So I don't assume.
Yeah, and maybe even check in with you know, figure out what gets them moving, what their, what their favorites are and what they're less keen on, but will eat.
Yeah, money's another example, right? Like giving literal coins or money, like of your currency, to be like, hey, like this is to pay you literally to do the working. You use it how you please, but Salt, you more than any of us, I think you're very familiar with the notion of giving money to spirits.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways of giving money to spirits. Like, hell money is very popular in the West, although that's, not really something you should be giving out to every single spirit. Like, there's issues with it. But yeah, I mean, spirits need money too. Like,
Or like the ingot, it's like the ingots that are like folded.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Another thing that's really interesting too, right, is I mean it is I've seen this many times just going to various like Taoist supply shops with you in our city, but it's just the sheer amount of like clothing that you can buy for the dead that's not even necessarily made of fabric. Can be made of paper and other kinds of things, right? You know, you give someone an outfit, you give someone a paper car, you give someone a paper cell phone that's folded out of foil or whatever like that. So like there's plenty of interesting things that like ancestral spirits might want to use in the afterlife. And sometimes they get very, very specific, like a cell phone, right? You know, but like
Mhm.
it's representations of wealth, it's also representations of communications. To keep that in mind too. Like or like why would you give a coin versus a cowrie and when are they equivalent versus when are they not?
One of my favorite things is like those stamped sheets that you can get where it's like shoes, car, phone, X additional money, all sorts of things, where it's like almost just this carpet bomb of an offering to be like, here's everything you could possibly need in the spirit world. Good
Yeah,
luck.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and don't forget a couple documents to make sure it gets through the spiritual postal service properly.
Mm-hmm. I love that. You mentioned that like a few episodes ago, and I was immediately obsessed with the idea of like how to make sure your offering gets to the spirit if you're sending it long distance, including a passport. I love how the bureaucratic nature of some of these offerings and like Shimasian and other kinds of Chinese traditions.
Yeah, and I mean, even outside of that, like the stars represent order, right? And so when it comes to, navigating those celestial hierarchies, you have to kind of, especially when they're so distant, like you want to be pretty careful with these offerings. You want to make sure that the right spirits are in attendance because, you know, they're distant.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, that distance can be breached in a lot of ways. I think, you know, the concept of sympathy is very important. And I think that brings us to the next subject, which would be presentation, right? Because presentation has a lot to do with the sympathy of the offering to the spirit, the
Absolutely.
and what draws them to the offering, right?
Hmm. Putting effort into a presentation, like how an offering is given, can be as much a component of the offering itself as it is literally like a necessary and inherent step. So, for example, like we mentioned before, different spirits like different kinds of presentations, you know, keeping things in packaging, for example. This is one of the things that like surprised me, and I totally get that it's a cultural thing, but like seeing you, for example, offering food in the packaging, like not taking it out, not opening it, and not putting it on like plates separately, or keeping like bottles that are given are closed. Made me realize that like, oh, it is so interesting because like I'm trained to like uncap things, uncork them, pour them into glasses, put them into their own plates, give them like I don't keep things in packaging. Whereas I've talked with friends who are, let's say, from Korea who were like, no, I would just give like a whole case of bottles of like water or bottles of like juice or alcohol in the plastic, like already, like not even the bottles taken out because the spirits are consuming it inherently. And part of the display of them in the packaging is also kind of a flex of wealth, you know, to be like, look, all this stuff has just been given directly to you. It's not being put anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, if you walk into any like folk shrine that isn't like, regularly tended to by like official priests, but like, something just random people will walk into and give offerings to occasionally, like every single time you walk into those places, you'll see them filled with bottles of water.
Hmm.
Like they're just left all over the place. Um, and it's kind of, some of that's probably to do with the conditions, like drinking water and so on. It's, some places it's safer just to go for the bottled stuff.
Hmm.
But Yeah, as well. Like I remember asking one of the people I was learning from, I was like, so how comes, what's with the package? He's like, why not? I mean, the spirits can open them.
Yeah.
So, that's yeah, it's one of those interesting like, elements. And as well, I think another topic that kind of relates to this is like cleanliness, right? Because if you're offering to Saturnian spirits, for example, what are they like? They're like wailing, they're like raggedy clothes, they're like, maybe not like too filthy, but they do like things being kind of dusty, that kind of vibe. Whereas with Venus, you gotta be clean, you gotta be showered, you gotta be pure, you gotta
Mhm.
be smelling good.
I'm so excited to share some of the Aphrodite story that Key and I experienced where we got literally showered before we got there.
Yeah.
The heavens did indeed open up. But yeah, I think that's it's a really great point, I love. It's one of those things that I think it's essential to know that yes, I love the idea that yes, they can open them. And some spirits are like, well, I like that you opened it for me. I like that you gave it to me. It's kind of like pouring someone a glass versus giving them the bottle. And these are different things depending on different cultures and different attitudes of spirits. Even within the same culture, there'll be different spirits that like different things. I've seen many friends from Thailand recommend putting straws in bottles of Fanta or strawberry Fanta or Red Bull, like just have it open, like cracked open with a straw inside versus ones that just keep it in the packaging, right? And in this case, it's also the presentation in terms of aesthetic beauty, right? Like having it arranged in a particular way in which you display the wealth. In the Serkyam Tibetan offering, right? You have a libation that is poured on the top part of the Serkyam, so like the kind of butter lamp looking stand, which then flows into the bottom. So the overflowing of the liquid is itself an offering because it shows the abundance, right? Even if it's not technically a large volume of tea or of alcohol that's being poured. So in that case, I think it's also important to note like the aesthetic and visual presentation. Like, is there a notion of excess? Is there like a lot of pennies versus a few toonies, right? To betray the Canadian verbiage, right? It's one of those things of like, okay, I get it, right? There's an idea of abundance in terms of like some spirits don't care about the value, they just care about the excess. Whereas others like a more austere presentation. They like things to be clean, white bowls, clean bowls that are not shared with other living beings. So some ancestral practices are like, no, do not share this with the living. You don't want the dead and the living eating off the same dish. And others insist on using shared bowls that are used communally among family as well as living spirits because it signals to them that like you are part of this environment, or they just don't care. Another thing is sometimes they just really don't care.
Yeah, I mean, some people are picky eaters, some spirits are picky eaters, and some people will eat anything, and some spirits will eat anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that we mentioned setting a dish with an empty chair at the table is one thing that can be done, right? But also so does eating together as a form of presentation, right? Like I've knelt down at a shrine and had a similar bowl and then we eat together when I've made offerings to certain really important spirits that are uh, basically blood relatives despite not being human. To me, like we are part of a family of non-human spirits. They will insist that I have a little bit of everything that is offered to them. And if I've offered him meat that I can't have because I didn't kill it myself, then I have to prepare vegetarian dishes so that I can partake in that is like sufficiently full of protein such that I can actually, there's an idea that I'm partaking of a sustenance, not just like the dessert or whatever it is that I baked for them as like a cake.
Yeah, I think that communal element is really, really crucial. Like, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a practice out there where it doesn't play some kind of role. I think even like it's just so crucial.
One
Like,
thing I have to mention though is once your spirits get used to you giving very beautiful, pretty, over-the-top offerings, they are going to expect it. Because something that can happen is they'll be like, oh, hey, I remember when you gave me the whole like presentation with like trimmed flowers, a whole ikebana essentially, plus a beautiful main dish that had like a whole swirl of honey and date syrup and stuff like that. Like you went out of your way to make it very aesthetic. And that to me was almost as much, if not more important than the sustenance, like what was actually being given. So what gives now? Like where did it go? Where did all that beautiful presentation go? Because this just looks like you just threw a bunch of stuff in a bowl. And to some spirits, they're like, hey, you threw a bunch of things in a bowl. Like, I love it. Like it's tasty. And I don't really care. But sometimes once you get them used to that, they can be a little bit like, well, where did the rest of it go? So it's important to, uh, again, overfeeding your spirits can be a problem, right? They get used to certain things and then they won't work for less. So sometimes some traditions that I'm in make mention of putting your spirits on essentially a diet where they're like, hey, maybe maybe hold off for a little bit. Let's calibrate, right? I've not had this particular issue. I think my spirits and I work them very much, so like they're used to doing lots of stuff all the time. But two, there's not really this kind of frustration or difficulty between us in terms of like negotiating these things, because my other spirits will keep the newer ones in line and keep them up to date on expectations. But this can certainly occur, right? So you might want to be very careful about tailoring things. Where like an overabundant display of affection might be appropriate for certain feasts and festivals, but not necessarily weekly. And certainly you want to also note like what is a birthday versus an everyday hangout, right? And also just to make sure that you're like, hey, you better be giving me money if you want me to get you absinthe, right? So like when a spirit is like, hey, I can do like the cheapest vodka you can get, versus a spirit, it's like, well, I want this top shelf whiskey or whatever like that, and you're like, great, I want money, and you can make that. You can tell them like, I will give you that if you reward me with enough financial opportunities where that is not going to be an issue for me. And then you can have it, but not always. So when I'm very fortunate to have lots of friends who visit me pretty often, as I've made mention allusion on this podcast several times, like in terms of people just coming over and doing things with me, and they'll bring offerings. And I tell my spirits, like especially if they're bringing something from out of town, or if they're bringing an alcohol that is not available in my country or that kind of thing, I'll be like, hey, this is a gift. Do not expect this very often. This is a gift from another person. I will not give it to you often. I will give it to you in shot glasses or directly pour it onto your idols and settlements occasionally. But don't get too used to this. This is a special thing.
Always important to remind the spirits where it's like, hey, this is a gift. You're getting a tiny bit. Keep doing these cool things if you want more of this. But otherwise, we're going back to Seagrams.
Yeah, we're back to Seagram 7. It's just you and me, buddy. Yeah. So I love the idea. We mentioned like the whole wafting of offerings to kind of bribe a spirit and motivate them to get their shit together. I do love the idea of sometimes I've heard stories from several people where they've basically taken their shrine down or taken their main vessel out for a walk around their neighborhood and been like, hey, like this is us if I don't get a job. Like I need you to do I need you to do what you were asked to do. I need you to make sure that I'm afloat. So this should be reciprocal, right? Spirits, what are their offerings to you? Like how do they go out of the way to help you when you don't ask? How do they ensure that you have luck and money and good things flowing into your life and opportunities? How do they enlighten you to wisdom such that you capitalize on these opportunities? They don't just come by you and then you don't do anything with them.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be transactional either. Like, if you have a friend who's just there leeching, like, that's not good either.
Hmm.
In the same respect, like this isn't a transactional relationship necessarily. It's also, about, showing the appropriate level of care, placing the appropriate amount of importance on that relationship.
Absolutely. I think that it's also the difference between being like, hey, you love teaching magic, I love learning magic. Teach me and give me access to many different kinds of um, traditions or many different or access to different things that I will respectfully engage with and genuinely do my best to be a part of. In return, I will be the best student you'll ever see. I will be adventurous, I will be disciplined, I will continually engage my erudition and grow in my learning. And I will give back to these communities. I will actively give back to the very peoples who are generous enough and trusting enough to accept me into these things. I'll make sure that they are rewarded richly by my efforts, because of their willingness to share with me. I will be the best possible person to return my investment, their investment into me to them, right? And so I think that is something that I really want to emphasize with the whole idea of like, when does presentation matter? It's also when if you're giving lots of offerings because you have lots of money for some, you mean like, but you're not really doing much with your spirits. Like they can be enough to keep them happy and paid off, but like it doesn't necessarily mean that you're really deeply engaging with them. So another thing to know is like, again, cooking it yourself versus buying it, right? That's also a thing that can happen. Like I like to swing by the bakery and get them something. I also like to bake for myself because I also love cooking just like he does.
Each step above and beyond, just goes to integrate yourself further into the life of the spirit, which is ultimately like kind of the point of what we're doing here, right? You know, it's like we just want to be in lockstep with them as they are with us, and
Hmm.
all of these things are to make that as not necessarily easy, but as smooth as possible.
Yeah. And I guess it leads us into disposal, because once you've made all the stuff, right? And I'm not saying this is a normal thing. Feasts are special, right? You know, they're nice to like post pretty pictures of, but they're not an everyday. But disposal of offerings. When, how, where, and why.
Think right off the bat, the easiest one is sometimes they can just go in the trash can or compost or down the drain in the kitchen, or even in some cases you can flush stuff out, like if it's a really negative omen that is trapped in the food. But
Yeah.
there's a certain degree of protocol, I suppose, and respect for what is now the property of the spirit once it's been given that can complicate this question. Like it's like, okay, if you have something on the shrine, do you chuck it in the garbage can? It's like there's some negotiation with the spirit and with the protocols of the given tradition to be had there.
We're part of a tradition that venerates spirits that live in these places too, right? Like the drain
Mhm.
can be fed directly. Like the spirits of your drain can be given offerings by pouring things down it, right? The spirits of your trash that are extremely important, right? Like they
Mhm.
take what you don't need and put it elsewhere as a healer, right? That's exactly how healing works, right? And it's
Exactly.
that kind of thing. Like, so I think especially when systems in Balkan traditional witchcraft, with the house itself is a living organ, a living entity that you're packed it to, right? Every room has its own features that are related to organs and sensations. So the trash is essential, right? So sometimes it's totally fine. Like there's some spirits that genuinely just don't care. They're like compost it. It's
Mhm.
fine. It goes back into nature. Sometimes because it's part of a prayer or petition or working, or because of that spirit's particular nature, they want you to kind of take it out into nature. They want you to, if it's biodegradable, right? They want you to leave it in the hollows of trees or by particular places and of power, tree stumps, riverbanks, these kinds of things. Three-way crossroads, four-way crossroads, sometimes seven-way crossroads, right? Depending on
Mhm.
what you're doing. Target locations that have to be affected, especially if this is part of the working, right? Is to bring the spirit to the place. So we mentioned bringing the pound cake of Set Expedite to a building in which the bureaucratic paperwork was that we were trying to influence to be completed more quickly was taking place, and that's exactly
Mhm.
the result that we got, right? Sometimes it's a matter of like, no, bring it to the church steps. Sometimes if it's cans of things that weren't opened, right? You can donate it. You can be like, I'm dropping this off at the nearest food bank.
Yeah, definitely. There's with food offerings as well, some protocols where it's like, once the food offering is made, it's fine to donate it. It's fine to feed it to someone who isn't necessarily yourself, or, it's like, okay, it's been on the shrine long enough, you can eat it to obtain the blessing that has accumulated as being part of the spirit's food.
Hmm.
Of course, there are some fun manuscript protocols as well, where it's okay, now that you've offered this meat to the spirit, feed it to an animal. Sometimes things will be like there's this one technique for breaking a curse that I saw in this one Arabic manuscript that was like, okay, now that it's done, feed it to a dog.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you have to feed it to animals. Sometimes you feed it to celebrate a spirit, you have to invite friends over to eat, right? So that's kind of what I've done a few times now, as you guys have seen. Like I've hosted a party where I'm like, hey, it's a dinner party, and friends who are clear with their nation to come and participate in the ritualistic aspect of it can absolutely do that. Sometimes other friends will be over and they just get to eat and have fun and then leave. Right, like an Ocha birthday is a very common example of that, right? Having been to several in the Lukumi Orisha tradition, right? You go and celebrate someone's crowning and you bring offerings, you end up eating, everyone goes home with the fruit, everyone eats a piece of the cake, right? And that's distributes the blessings and celebrates the person's relationship with their head Orisha. I think an important aspect of disposal is to not fuck with it once it's disposed. So if you give it an off, like let's say you've left an offering at a crossroad and you happen to walk by that crossroad fairly often. Let's say it's like the main, like the third one outside of your neighborhood. So if you're walking towards the bus stop or whatever it is, or you're driving by, and you might like see it, right? You might see that it's been decomposing. You might see that animals have gotten to it, or you might see that like someone took the bottle of alcohol that you left there, that kind of thing. Don't disturb it. if you see someone actively looking at it or taking pictures of it or like,
Mhm.
kind of poking at it, like do not screw with it. At that point, it's up to the spirits, like what they want done with it, whether they want it consumed by animals, whether they want it like put into different places. Like at that point, it's between them and their gods, as it were. So I would just say though that be mindful of disposal, especially depending on the traditions that you're part of and the kind of presentation that you have. Sometimes it's not a bad thing to just be like, okay, it has to be left here it can be in the trash can, but it shouldn't be in your house. So put it in like by the garbage, in a public place at a crossroad. You might want to double bag it in some plastic bags and put it by there so it's not seen what it is. You might want to make sure it's fully biodegradable if you're leaving it out in nature. And you might also want to just make sure that in general, if you're distributing things around in cemeteries and other places, that you do so in a way that is, on the one hand, doesn't look shady, you don't want to get necessarily stopped and questioned, or seem like you're littering, right? Or on the other hand, just make sure that, I mean, I bring flowers to cemeteries to always look like I have a reason to be leaving things, right? It's also easy for gathering dirt, right? You just put it down, you take a scoop and you go. But it's also just a good thing to look natural and to not necessarily have people be staring at you or being weird about it, depending on the place that you're in and how culturally acceptable it is to be going around and leaving such things. I've not really had this issue, but we've had a few Patreon Q&A questions where people have asked about like, how do you get over the anxiety of leaving things in public or gathering dirt in public? And yes, I think we mentioned in the gathering materia episode that you and I did, Key, that was sometimes we just stare at people down. But absolutely, it's also a matter of being smooth about it, right? Making sure that it's not an inconvenience to people, and that at the end of the day, just leave it go. Don't particularly be worried about it, and just know that at the end of the day, it's between you and your spirits, right? You've made good on your pact. Whisper your prayer under your breath, maybe stomp the ground 3 times, and you're off.
And one note about disposing offerings into the world and like dispersing them wherever they may go. If you're not the only one making offerings to spirits around, if you're encountering other people's offerings on the road, don't touch them. Don't fuck with them.
Yes. Thank you. I actually forgot about that, but so true. Like there's this one cemetery that's not even like the most popular one or the biggest one or the most like the one with like the most interesting graves, as it were, in my city, but I worked that one a lot. One, because some spirits I've met there, two, because of like experiences I've had there, and three, just because of its convenience, for me. And like it used to just be me. Like I would come back and I would see coins that I left last time or things that I've left, ages ago that are still there. Like I remember putting that there. I remember leaving this little bottle of rum. And then time passes, and especially because I've told a few local friends about it, and I see other things there, and then things that aren't theirs either. I just like, okay, there's other people doing stuff. And that's great. Don't touch it. Like, like if you see someone leaving a charm bag hanging on a tree somewhere, do not touch it. Like, don't do anything with it. It's not even just like that you don't want those spirits to mess with you. It's just it's not your business. Like, I wouldn't want anyone doing that to me. It's one thing if a spirit is like, hey, look, there's a thing here. You should take it home, because it's just like a really cool object that they're like, this could be for you, like this is someone left this at the curb, they don't need it anymore, it's an interesting little thing, and like go take it home. Like, don't, it's okay. It's another thing if it's clearly a working, which I've been in many places where like in my travels where like you see workings everywhere. Like more often than not, there are things in the cemetery. Or there are things, by certain trees, or there's a shrine that's actively worked, right? There's like a tomb or a particular shrine where people are leaving things, or one of those like classic cases of like trees or fences where there's tons of locks, right? For love, or shoes that are hanging off a place, that kind of thing. Like, okay, yeah, that's a gathering place, but like don't disturb the other ones.
So many reasons not to fuck with them.
Unless there's one exception. When you roll up on your ops and you know it's them who left it there. Because that's when you put the bally on, and that's when you take it and you say, he didn't give it to you, bro. Nani?
or like sabotaging other people's offerings. Yeah, that's when you live in like a city where you're beefing with people. Or like cases, I won't name names obviously for the sake of privacy, but like you get people who are like like no, like there's a house that's beefing with my house here, or there's like a whole temple that's like mad at my temple. I've even Salt, you told me all kinds of funny situations in China with like temples and their beef with each other, and they go out and sabotage each other's things. Absolutely, right? Or they're like they'll this is one of the reasons why you should necessarily always tell people which spirits you work with, right? Someone can go in and on your behalf make a pretty serious offering to that spirit to either bribe them away from you or to booby trap it. It's like call your spirit towards them and then light up some gunpowder and shoot the thing and explode it in their face, that kind of thing. There's a ritual I know across traditions, including across completely different cultures, a similar technique in which you essentially call someone else's spirit to you and then ignite the offering with sulfur, which blows up in the spirit's face to harm them. Or you essentially sabotage an offering prematurely so that the spirit gets hungry and you're like tempting them with something like pork, for example, or blood that you just bought from a supermarket, and you're like tempting them forward, and then right as you're about to present it to them, you deny it to them, like you scorch it or something like that, and then you're like, yeah, you'll be hungry forever unless you finish this task, or
Mhm.
unless you go out and do this thing that's very aggressive, devour this other person's luck or fortune or health and so on. So there's some pretty nasty curses that can be thrown this way. So it's one thing about which spirits you have a relationship with, in which it's actually kind of like a good thing to be public about it to a certain extent. Like it's good to praise them publicly. It's good to kind of acknowledge their importance in your life publicly, especially for like major saints and deities. But some things you're like, no one has to know,
Mhm.
and it's really better if they don't.
And I think that takes us into our next point of we've been talking a lot about how, when, where, what, why to give offerings. When should you not make offerings to spirits?
Ah, very good.
And of course, the secrecy that you just described is one of those cases where it's like, I'm not going to give public praise to this spirit who just did this awesome thing because, as you said, no one needs to know.
No one needs to know. It's a class of spirits that no one needs to know that you work with, right? Not just an
Mhm.
individual one. It's there's so many things that like we're a bit more open about, and there's so many things that like no one will ever know that the three of us either share this lineage or individually work with these lineages of formal witchcraft that I'm initiated in that no one is ever gonna know outside of really close friends that I have. And I'm never gonna post about it publicly, right? In any
Mhm.
degree. Not because I don't love those spirits, I'm not confident in my connection to them, but because we work in secrecy, right? Same thing with I think we mentioned before when the work wasn't completed, right? Like that's something that's
Mhm.
important, right? Hold fast on your end of the bargain and use that as a motivational kind of bargaining chip to make sure it does go through. Come back to the drawing board. We talked about this in our last episode, right? Troubleshooting your sorcery. Come back to the drawing board, figure out why it didn't work, and proceed further. Um, Another thing, we've talked a lot about protocols and traditions that have baked into them ideas of how to give offerings to spirits and which ones to avoid, which versus which ones are appropriate at what stage of your practice. So if you don't know those protocols, if you're interested in a spirit or you're being courted by a spirit that is from a place that you don't know, their explicit nature or the interpretation of the offerings. So we mentioned not thanking fairies, right? Like gifts that are interpreted as servitude versus gifts that are interpreted as gratitude are entirely different categories. I think one thing that's really important to know is like, well, if you're not aware of it, find out. And start simple. Or with draw until you know. You can be like, I want to work with you more appropriately. Bring me a resource that will help me do this. Bring me the right kind of book, bring me the right kind of person, bring me into contact with the right kind of lore so that I may proceed with this in the proper way. Also, don't overfeed, right?
Yeah.
There's a difference between being fat and happy versus fat and lazy in terms of like getting spirits to that level, right?
Mhm. It's like you want to show abundance, but not too much abundance.
You don't want to weigh them down, unless you do need to weigh them down, right? To get them to shut
Mhm.
the fuck out. You want to empower them, right? It's the abundance of plenty, as you said, versus the opposite, right? Where in which you're like, there's a lot going on, but there's so much going on that they can't even move.
Mhm.
Um, and also, I would say some spirits don't take offerings in the conventional way, and nor should you necessarily offer to them. There's certain ones, at best, it's a thank you, or a display of gratitude. More than that is not up to you. It's up to priests of that tradition to mediate for you. They're the ones with the authority, and the ritual ability to do so. So it's not up to you. It's up to you. You go to a priest and you have them arrange it on your behalf if that's necessary. In other cases, just don't give them anything because this is a kind of contract labor that is a bit more aggressive. Demons can be this way, right?
Mhm.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like
Like if
you
you're
know,
forcing them to do it for you, right?
yeah, and it's also a sign like it can be a sign of weakness even. Like as you said earlier, like servitude almost like some spirits, they're just going to interpret that as submissiveness or an unwillingness to command them in the way that they're used to commanding other people in the way they're used to being commanded themselves, right? Like, which, yeah, very often the case with devilish spirits and more malign creatures.
There's a real difference between like someone who has a witchcraft-based practice in which they know how to deal with certain spirits that are too dangerous for others to deal with, versus somebody who's just trying to like approximate a practice based on other cultural knowledge without any of the context of like the differences between spirits.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And the latter is far more difficult to do in many ways. Like, there's so
Mhm.
much that can be missed, there's so much that can go wrong. Like, when you're operating within the confines of a cultural tradition, so to speak, tradition meaning many things, then you have a little more guidance. You have, as we said, like you have these protocols, they're set in stone, whereas without that, you kind of have to feel your way through the dark, and that's a risk. Like,
Yeah. I think something that's always good to mention in that case too is like we've mentioned animals and blood, right? Like, do not do that unless you're trained to do that or part of a system that has taught you how to do that safely, painlessly, quickly, in a way that you know how to process the body afterwards. You know how to deal with that and the cultural taboos as well as legal provisions of your particular place. And don't do it openly, right? Like there are temples where you can absolutely go see that done and be trained in how to do that, but you need certain ranks as well in those systems to be able to know how to do that. You may need a priest to do it on your behalf if that is the case, and also you need to know how to make sure that the blood is being given directly to that spirit and not to anything else that's going to smell it and be like, oh my God, I want that. How to make sure that is directly being given to the intended recipient. I'm not going to speak on that further publicly because those are lineage secrets, as it were, or trainings that are not really meant to be known by people outside of the contexts in which I have been trained in. But it's just to say that, like, if you hear us mentioning it, it's only because it is an important example to bring up. It's not one, though, to engage with without that particular training. And I guess the final thing we can maybe talk about is what do you do to make up for the fact that you promised an offering and you didn't do it? Kind of like in our very first example, right? Like when to give it is when you promised them. But what happens if you need to make up for something like that? This is something that has come up a few times, I think, in Q&As, as well as people kind of more privately messaging us to say that, like, hey, like I blanked out, I lost track of time, I was busy, I was supposed to do this thing on the new moon, I got home late, I fell asleep, that kind of thing.
I think one of the examples that we've given even in this episode is like to make kind of a abnormally extravagant offer in that case. But the most important component of that is to actually recognize that you fucked up and to mention to the spirit, be like, hey, my bad, and to kind of treat it as you would any other relationship in which, you may have erred or committed like a faux pas of some kind.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And having it's kind of like a good apology to a friend,
Mhm.
right? Is being able to move forward and be like, here's the remediation. Like, here's the commitment to not doing that again. And here's how I'm going to make sure that happens. So if you're busy and you work really odd hours and it's really hard to stay consistently, like I'm not going to promise it will be on this particular moon phase. I'm going to promise it will be monthly. So I'm going to do it at some point in the month and it's going to happen. But to make sure that you don't get offended because I missed a particular moon phase that you wanted it on, let's start here and then hopefully I'll transition to a career in which that won't be an issue. Or if you're just somebody who's very, very prone to dealing with, not just like overwhelm, right? Because of your job or your career or your particular things. But like some of us have like are dealing with mental health stuff or dealing with ADHD and are dealing with all kinds of things that make staying on task not always the easiest thing. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be a lesser sorcerer for it. Not at all, right? These things can even be situations in which you can play that to your advantage. But if it is a difficult thing to deal with, right? It's finding the right rhythm for you without overpromising is the best. Always, it's better to overdeliver, right? Or than necessarily like overpromise. So I would say that, a really important thing to move forward with is like, yes, recognition of error and knowing that not every spirit's going to be super pissed off. Some of them might be, but like some of them will be very understanding too. But check in with the spirit itself. Let them know ahead of time what you're going to start off with. Build from there as your ability allows you to. But don't think that you're like less pious or less devoted if you can't do huge things. There are people who live in abject poverty that can move mountains with just a single candle and a glass of water because of their dedication to their spirits and because of the way that they have built that bond over time. It's not about the abundance. It's also about the abundance in heart, I would say, as opposed to material.
I think that's kind of the perfect place to leave it. And, we have some Akashic records that are offerings to spirits unto themselves in some ways.
Indeed, indeed. Mine is Zadushnica by Voivode, the experimental cold punk band out of Bulgaria. I love all their tracks, but I mentioned the Mitrovska Zadushnica as like a phenomenon in November, right? As the Saturday right by Mitrovdan, which is really huge for me. But the Zadushnica in general are these necromantic feasts of the ancestors in Orthodoxy, and this is just such a great song.
And speaking of the ancestors in Orthodoxy, even, my Akashic record for the day is Liturgy of the Pre-Sanctified Gifts as delivered by the Holy Trinity Seminary.
Oh, hell yeah. That's so I'm getting you on the Orthodox.
Oh, man. And the alternative Akashic record of the day is Bad Ritual by Timber Timber. Really good song, and talks about bad ritual.
Hell yeah.
And to close it out, the license to depart for today is a kata to actually give offerings to pry or necromantic devas and spirits.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, I remember this because shout out to the Gary episode that we did, episode 17 on balancing traditions. That was one in which we talked about a few different kinds of katas, right? That can empower amulets, awaken them, get them ready to feed. It's like songs in different traditions that get a spirit aware. It's kind of like it's dinner time, get them like, hey, be awake, be present, you're about to eat. Because don't not be in the room when the offering is being given. That's a good point to make, right? It's like whatever protocols your tradition has to like get a spirit aware. It's one thing if you leave it on their shrine where they're going to be around and they'll see it, versus when you're calling them from another place and be like, hey, awake, arise, be present. You're being fed right now.
The come here to eat versus come here, very different, and incredibly complex ritual cosmologies behind it.
Exactly.
Topic for another episode.
Indeed. No, thanks, gentlemen. This was great.
I had a lot of fun today. It's a fun one to put together, and good to hang out.
Yeah, and hopefully very useful to our wonderful listeners.
Happy feasting with the spirits, folks.
Indeed, indeed. All right, Key, take it away.
All right. So, of course, you begin with the Namandasa 3 times in the case of any kata. But to get into it, it's Yang Injit Jitang Itawa Arungwa Pochanangwa Puchanti Ehi Namapata Nalaputa.